Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Basics of Life. My name's Ken Burkey, and John Loera is in the house. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
Doing
Always.
well?
Doing great.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
Everything's good.
Got a lot of topics, but I'm going to kind of introduce the topic, and I'd like your feedback on it.
My feedback?
Your feedback,
It's amazing.
Yes, yeah. We're going to, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind, and I know you're passionate about some of these topics, is our culture. You know, we all are a product of our culture.
Right.
And for good or bad. And our culture can tend to be kind of superficial. I don't know if you've noticed.
Myself included.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we tend to focus in on things like, you know, our appearance, you know, we compare our possessions.
Right.
Status, glamour.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just admit, we're not trying to be Debbie Downers.
No.
Our culture kind of, because of marketing and because of, you know, that big machine of making money, it operates kind of on a pretty shallow level. And what I want to celebrate today, but then ask us to focus in on in a deeper way, is God has created us much deeper than that. With just, I mean, He created us to be amazing. I mean, we're made in His image, and obviously we're fallen, we're all sinners, but He wants us to go much deeper than our culture.
Right.
And so I just want to talk about some areas that I would like to challenge people. And again, I want your feedback of what this looks like. Let's look at some areas, the way God has wired us up, that we don't tend to focus in on.
It's interesting just when you talk about this stuff, our culture not going that deep. It's not that necessarily those things are bad, but there does seem to be something missing when you talk to people, even if they've experienced those superficial sorts of importances. But this deeper, you know, missing this deeper sense of, I don't know, satisfaction.
People who have become famous or have made a lot of money, they tend to thrive. The ones that thrive tend to focus in on these other things that we're going to talk about. Because that stuff doesn't, on its own, it'll drive you crazy. So there's nothing wrong with that stuff, but that's
on its
so
own,
much
like
deeper. Right. And obviously the first one, God made us relational beings. He made us relational, and yet, how often do we really say, I'm going to be proactive and work? I want my relationships to work, but am I going to invest? Because God is a relational God. He sent His Son to die for us, and He said that, you know, you can't do life alone. You have to do it together. So relationships, some of the most content people in this world aren't the rich, but they're people who are investing in relationships. Just talk about where you just came from, what's going on. I mean, those are relationships.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just dealing with some of our population that is, you know, without homes right now, and just trying to get back on their feet. And we go over and are able to kind of, you know, do life together, share, you know, kind of life experiences, talk about, you know, kind of helping one another. And so a group of people goes over, and it is very relational. It's just about connectedness and how to help one another. It's interesting because that is what people are starving for. You know, we were talking about that the last time I was over there, because it literally is one of the basic human needs. Where God wired us that way, to be connected to each other. And you know what I think is interesting about that is going back to the superficial stuff that we pursue in our society, that almost keeps us from being able to do that. You know, and some of it is not intentional, but when we pursue and we're so busy, you know, busyness is a killer. You know, trying to kind of get up into this ladder of whatever that is or acquire, we almost starve out our relationships. It's almost like we might say, hey, these relationships are important, but we're never investing in them.
We did a whole show, you and I did, on disconnection. The biggest problem in the world is disconnection. And if you were to talk to the people who are experiencing homelessness in their life right now, and some of the paths they took, a lot of it was
on their own,
isolation.
That's exactly right.
And you're right, in our culture, I was thinking as you were saying that, we have to be proactive. God made us relational beings, and you can have a lot of struggles and challenges in life, or great successes in life. And if you're alone, you're not happy, and you're not going to be sustainable. You have healthy relationships. So I'm thinking of Facebook, Twitter, TV. It used to just be TV. You know, turn the TV off and go. But now we got all of these distractions.
So
and again, not that they're all wrong, but sometimes we've kind of done something lately with our family and friends, and that is, you know, we have a table out back that we all sit around at night, light candles when it gets dark, and sit out there so you're not around. Turn your phones off, you know, and let's just talk.
You know what that is? That's being intentional.
Yeah.
And I think what we have to recognize, because I think if you talk to the average person, they'll say, no, my relationships are important.
Yeah.
But how that plays out is if we're not intentional with them, we're not investing in them.
Right.
And all of a sudden, and it kind of creeps in, it's insidious to where we, over time, it's almost like, wow, we're not close.
Right.
I think about that in marriages
Yeah.
and relationships where, some of the things that happen over time in marriages where they sadly end up in divorce or completely separated is based upon not investing in the relationship.
Yeah, right.
Not huge things that cause a problem, but little things that just slowly but surely make us more and more disconnected.
Right. I just, before we move on, I think this relational thing, like you said, you have to be intentional. And globally, what I love about, working with like Compassion International is they'll take people who are in extremely poor situations, but they gather them together in the compassion churches and projects, and all of a sudden these kids build healthy relationships, with peers and with mentors and teachers. Same thing at Green Valley. You see people who can overcome a lot of things, whether it's through grief share, celebrate, overcomers, whatever it is, because healthy relationships are being built. And
it's so foundational.
Yeah, and it goes even deeper scripturally wise, where it says the evil one, the enemy, Satan, with his whole desire for the human race is to isolate.
That's right.
And so, and it's easy to be isolated in our culture.
Right.
There's another one that I want to talk about, because relationally we have to be intentional. But this one
foundational.
may not sound as obvious, but there's this social component. It goes along with relational, but God made us social beings. And what I mean by social beings is we are to be involved in healthy relationships, but also in social, being leaders and being influencers and helping our society become better. The old thing back in the day, neighborhood watch. Hey, we're together. We're going to socially make this a better place. And now, again, this relates to relationally too, because again, we're isolated. We don't know our neighbors. Again, I'm not going to get on a high horse, but less and less people vote. So, are we concerned? We're social beings, and we need to. We can't be isolated.
I think that's when you talk about that, the thing that I think about is community.
Community. That's a great word.
And I like that because, and it's through relationships that we actually can develop a healthy community. And it's caring beyond ourselves, and it's also even caring beyond just our little circle of connections. To say, how do we make our community relational? How do we actually make or the world, if you go, and expand it out, but it's to care enough and say, you know what, to create a great community, to deal with, poverty, to deal with, homelessness, to deal with education, all of these things. It has to care beyond me and my little world here,
Well, again, American culture, sometimes it's become kind of, I'm independent. It's me, myself, and I. But we're created as social beings, and to transform our world for the better, we have to be socially involved. What I love, again, I'll do a global example with Compassion International. You sponsor a kid, they're expected, because they learn from scriptures, that socially I'm going to be aware, and how do I help solve some of our social issues. It also goes to just being socially aware of being socially competent to be able to say hi in public and to look people eye to eye and say, hey, I'm part of a bigger picture than rather everybody. I'm going to sound old here, but old people do this too. But everybody's got their pods in their ear and they're walking down, and people don't even know how to introduce themselves anymore and look them in the eye and go, hi, my name is. And so, but our social etiquette has wavered. But God created us to be social beings. I think it's huge. And
it's putting ourselves out there. It's caring about somebody else. And again, caring about our society and our culture. I think about culture and all of that. And, the word cultivate, it means culture. It's us putting into our culture and investing into it. And then it implies when you cultivate, you're growing something healthy. But you have to really go and put yourself into that. And again, I think it challenges us too to get outside of ourselves, like you said, because the putting ourselves down in our headsets and focus here sometimes implies that I'm really not you know, well, I don't have to, that really doesn't have to do with me.
Right.
But the world changes when people say, no, this does have to do with me.
Yeah.
And I do care, and I can make a difference.
Yeah. That's
I like
good.
that.
Well, we're going fast here, but I want to hit a couple other ones. And these may seem really counterintuitive, but I think we can take this for granted. But God, I want to talk about not only the emotional component God is, I mean, the relational and the social, but the emotional component. That we are emotional beings.
Yeah.
And again, we live in a harsh society where we don't want to go there.
Yeah.
But to being emotionally healthy takes being intentional. It takes guarding our hearts.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I'm not a Puritan and I'm not, you know, holier than thou, but you know, to be emotionally healthy, you need to be socially healthy, relational healthy, but you also need to guard your heart and cultivate. You know, Paul says in the scriptures, think upon those things that are good and lovely. Right. You know, not on this, and there's a lot of stuff that we shouldn't be filling our minds with. And that's not a legalistic thing. No. It's about God made us emotional beings, and we you know, we can be fragile, or we can also be full of really good stuff, and it's really our choice.
Well, and I think you have the basic principles that are actually, you know, mental health professionals will tell you that very thing about our emotional health. And it's amazing how the Bible and science really do, you know, they connect very well. Right. And there's a reason for that, because God created us to be emotionally healthy and focusing on having gratitude and focusing on those things that help us to, you know, where we fix our mind and our thoughts is really going to affect our behaviors. So it is important to ask ourselves and to have this assessment to say, you know, where do I spend my time focused mentally?
And I think the biggest one, and you've talked on this a lot, the biggest one is the emotional state of either forgiveness or bitterness. I was talking to a friend last night, and he's got some other friends that they've got a family mess, and somebody needs to choose to forgive first. And so my friend, he's a friend of yours too, he told his buddy, dude, you got to get over this. You're just filled. There is nothing healthy about your emotions. You're the adult here. You take the first step and say, let's get over this. Let's forgive. So sometimes, I think you just said this in a message a while ago, that, you know, just that if people, the emotional health of people would just increase in amazing ways if we just chose to be an emotional state of forgiveness rather than bitterness.
And it is amazing, going back to think about the roadblocks when we hold on to, say, unforgiveness and bitterness. It affects our social and our ability to have relations that are healthy. So it is so intertwined to say, hey, this is such a critical part of our health. The other thing too is how do you deal with, and I think with the emotional health, is to look at, hey, there's people through their experiences that have been damaged pretty significantly that are unhealthy emotionally, not by their own doing. And going back to this importance of our emotional health is it's important to be able to go and work through those things.
And get help. I
mean, that is not bad. Our culture says, oh, be strong, don't show your weakness, you know.
It's almost a scarlet A, you know, and it's not.
And it's not at all.
No.
And again, think about if you have a society that is supportive of that, and you have relationships that will encourage you to do that, you also are more inclined to say, okay, this is okay, I need to get some help with this. And it is so important for us to actually do a self-assessment and go, you know, how healthy? What do I struggle with? What am I? What is getting in the way of me really living the way God is wired? You know, it'll keep us from going deeper for sure. You know?
And there's some vulnerability there. I want to move on because I want to do a review. But you know, we're talking about relationally and socially and emotionally. This is really counterintuitive, but I think Americans take this for granted, but God's made us educationally, God has made us with this brilliant mind. God created us.
Well, not you.
Not me.
Or me either, but
I've tapped out. But
yes, he has.
And it is a shame, and bad things happen when education doesn't happen. God created us to learn, to thrive. You know, we're His creation, and you see that when you know, let me just speak globally for a second. When girls in Africa go through secondary education, they're 6 times less likely to be married as a child bride. Because of education. When I'm in Niger, Africa, when you have 13% literacy rate, the government can take advantage of you
Yeah.
because you can't read, you have no rights.
Yeah.
And yet God made us all precious in His sight, and so the educational side is really
Huge. It's huge.
It's huge, and we don't think about it as a spiritual thing. We don't think about it as okay, whatever. But you see the impact, and how people cannot be all that God has created them to be without. And I'm not talking about 18 degrees and all that. I'm talking about the basic education where people can stand up for themselves.
Well, and there's a direct correlation between education and power.
Yeah.
Power and empowerment.
Right.
And if you look at history, you would go back and say, where the power was those that were educated, and the uneducated basically just kind of were taken advantage of, which still happens.
Right.
And so, yes, it is so important.
Yeah.
And God, like you said, I go back to that word cultivate again, because God created this amazing mind in us to enhance.
Right.
And it's not a bad thing.
No.
It's actually a great thing.
Right.
And it's also tied, it's interesting because personal growth is one of those things that are scientifically tied to our contentment and happiness is when we're
that's
growing.
Right. Yeah.
So if we're educating ourselves, that's a very, very healthy thing to do.
And,
I love that.
Yeah, in our culture, again, if we're going to be socially aware, then we need to see that education is not equal, even in our culture. Now, again, I'll go back to I love Compassion International, because when you sponsor a kid, they get connected to a church socially, emotionally, relationally, but they also get guaranteed an education through
huge.
Secondary and all the way through to teenage years. It makes all the difference in the world. Last one. This is what, because the last one is financial. Our culture says we're financial beings. The Bible says. Our culture says, hey, get. But there's a stewardship arena too, which impacts relationships. It impacts our social. It impacts our education system. It impacts our emotions, and that is, what do we do with the things God has given us?
Exactly, stewardship.
And so, just financially, we are to be good stewards in our the Bible talks about savings. The Bible talks about tithing and generosity and helping those, the widows and the orphans, and living simply.
Right.
So that, as Mother Teresa said, so that others may simply live. Our culture does not teach us this either.
No.
Our culture says, you just live on the edge or spend beyond.
Or give up your life to make more money, and it's those trappings that actually goes the opposite way.
Yeah.
And when you think about financial, that's a huge one, because you hear the cliches of money's the root of all evil, and but there are it is a huge distraction in our lives from these other deeper, healthier things.
Yeah.
But you can look at it financially and go, it's actually a good thing.
Absolutely.
And if I do learn stewardship, there's nothing wrong with making money. But if I learn the art, the gift, gratitude, and like you said, the giving, and to have stewardship and to be able to make money but yet still keep perspective, it's super healthy.
It is. In fact, the Bible talks more about money than anything else, because it makes us or breaks us. It can be a gift to our world. You see what generosity begets more generosity, and greed begets more greed. So this is the thing. This is why I want to wrap. If you look at the church, so you go relational, social, emotional, educational, and financial.
Yeah.
At Green Valley, we want to help people in all those areas.
Yeah.
And we have classes and we have services and all, because you combine all those, that's all spiritual.
Yeah.
God made us relational, first of all, to be in a relationship with Him and then with one another.
Yeah.
Made us to be social, emotional, educational. He wants us to be all that He's called us to be. He wants us to be great stewards. And so you combine all those things. And all those things, again, our culture doesn't focus in on as much. It's just very shallow. You begin to grow in those areas, and you grow closer to the heart of God.
I love that. Yeah. And I think about it and go, hey, and through all of that, people are experiencing relationship. They're experiencing this relationship with God. They're growing, and so often when people go through life storms, it's in one of these areas or all of them that they're trying to get back into a place that's healthy, And I think about spiritual health, and that epitomizes that.
Yeah.
That's why we have these classes and we have all of these opportunities. But what I do love is at the foundation of all of those, this spiritual is that relational component.
Yeah. That's why I started with that, because it comes down to
the
two great commands. be in a relationship with God and with one another.
Because somebody comes in and just using a financial, one of our support groups or classes, for example, which is so healthy, but people are experiencing relationship there too.
Yeah.
And the social aspect.
Yeah, it all goes hand
It's
in
so
hand.
connected.
So the Dave Ramsey course that we run, you go in there with a financial, you want to become a better steward. All of a sudden your emotions, you have peace.
Yeah.
And then you're able to then have some tools to help someone else, which is a social thing.
Right.
Education, you're growing, you're being smarter, and then those relationships.
Yeah, I like that it actually ultimately ends us into a deeper spiritual place, which is where we really do experience the ultimate peace and joy and contentment.
Yeah, wow.
Think about it.
We need to go back to that. We're done.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't even get to talk about the physical. Of course, I know our culture focuses on the physical, but I think there's
Good
a
stuff.
stewardship there too.
Yeah.
So
Good stuff.
yeah.
Exciting.
Well, thanks for just sitting and letting John and I talk, because we could talk all day. But thanks for being with us here on the Basics of Life, and we will.
We should continue
In
that.
any of those areas, if you need any help or come to Green Valley, call. We'll help you get connected to those right places, because God's made us in all of those arenas.
Yeah.
So thanks, man.
Cool. Thank you.
All
Good
right.
stuff.
We'll see you next time on the Basics of Life.